So if you're thinking about self-medicating, don't. Hey you guys, what's going on? I'm Dr. Danny and I hope you guys are doing really well. Last video, we left off saying what a migraine is and why people get it. If you didn't watch it, basically I mentioned how everything starts in the hypothalamus, and what actually triggers the pain in the head and the migraine is inflammation in the surface of the brain. If you want any more details, you can always go check it out. Today we're going to dive into what you can do to get some control over those headaches. I really hope you enjoy this video enough for you to tap that like button, and just in general that it serves of some help. So let's get started. There's a variety of different medications out there for migraines, but here we're just going to focus on three main classes. If you go to a doctor for the very first time for migraines, he or she might prescribe you NSAIDs, and you could normally find them over the counter as naproxen or ibuprofen, and you would take them with the onset of pain. So if you're thinking about self-medicating, don't. It's just tricky and you have to be careful, because if you take it for 15 days or more per month, then you're at risk of developing a headache because of the pain medication. So it's like you have a headache, you treat it with pain medication, and now you have another headache because of the pain medication. And then also, depending on your individual case, the doctor could start you with Triptans, which for the most part are very effective for migraines. And then from there, just scale up or change medications depending on your individual case. And if you have 2 migraines or more per month, then you have an indication for preventative treatment, which is normally done with beta blockers, usually propranolol. These medications, some of them are probably new to you, so I don't know if you want to know how they work, but I'll just tell you anyway. So we talked about NSAIDs, or non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And remember that in the surface of the brain in migraines, there's a little bit of inflammation. So the anti-inflammatory drugs are going to act there, and they're also going to block pain in different mechanisms that we're not going to talk about. The other thing that we mentioned was the triptans. Well, triptans are going to act as a serotonin, and so they're going to act on the serotonin receptor, and they're going to increase its function. And then lastly, we talked about beta blockers, and beta blockers, they block the beta receptors, and beta receptors normally increase that fight or flight mode. So in the brain, it includes the dilation of blood vessels so that more blood and therefore more oxygen and nutrients are received. In general though, beta receptor function leads to increase in metabolism, heart rate, breathing rate, even neuronal firing rate. So in our case, where we are blocking these receptors, we'll end up with a reduction of these. So the way beta blockers work for migraine prevention is that it induces a constriction in the blood vessels, so it decreases the inflammation, but it also decreases the firing of the neurons. So remember the nerve endings in the surface of the brain that carry the information that there's inflammation, and then it translates into pain? Well, now because of the beta blockers, there's going to be less firing of those neurons. Now, if you've tried all of these things, going to the doctor, getting the proper medications and all of that, and you still have migraines, I'm sorry. But hopefully the last things that we talk about in this video equip you with the tools so that you can be in charge of your own health and hopefully decrease the intensity and frequency of your migraines. Some management options that you'll probably hear from me a lot if I continue making these videos include exercising, sleeping well, decreasing stress, and nutrition. You guys, you don't know how important this is to your overall health and for migraines too. And there are so many things to talk about with these topics, but right now I want to focus on nutrition specifically, to zoom in on 2 diets that I think are pretty cool: the keto diet and the elimination diet. So let's talk about the ketogenic diet first. Essentially, it's a diet that involves eating low to no carbs, moderate protein, and high fats. Essentially healthy fats. And as the name implies, it allows for the body to go through ketogenesis, meaning that it creates ketone bodies. And these ketone bodies are used as a supplemental energy source. You see, the body normally uses glucose for energy, but when there is low glucose, like for example in a fasting state, you produce ketone bodies for energy. And this is important because when glucose is elevated for long periods of time, it induces a lot of inflammation that can damage the tissues. And this is actually something that happens in diabetes. So if you have less glucose and less glucose is metabolized, then you will have less inflammation. In other words, a ketogenic diet is essentially an anti-inflammatory diet. And so you could see how it can help with a migraine, right? Because it decreases the inflammation in the surface of the brain. But there's a difference between the traditional keto diet and other ketogenic diets. You see, the traditional keto diet holds a ratio of fat to carbs and protein of 4:1 or 3:1, while other more popular ketogenic diets, like for example the Modified Atkins diet, follows a 1:1 or 2:1 ratio of fat to carbs and protein. This just makes it a little bit more tasty, more flexible, and less restrictive, but still has similar effects because it still induces a ketogenesis. Okay, so there's a lot of promises and anecdotal evidence all across the internet that keto is the best thing in the world. And in theory, it should work, but what does medical evidence show? Most studies in relation to migraines are done with a small sample of specific patients, of which many don't follow through the entire length of the proposed keto diet plan. This just means that the power of the current studies is low, and that it's not necessarily applicable to the general population. In other words, we still need to do more studies to measure how effective it really is. Regardless, the keto diet shows promising effects not only in migraines but in other neurological disorders, like for example in refractory epilepsy, or outside of neurology in obesity and cardiovascular diseases. But just like any other treatment option, whether it's natural or not, it'll have its indications, adverse effects, and compliance struggles. So it's always a good idea to bring any therapy desires to the doctor in your next visit. Adverse effects for following the keto diet, for example, can commonly include muscle cramps, fatigue, weight loss, constipation. So does this mean that you shouldn't try keto for your migraines? Not necessarily. An expert panel, which I will include in the description of the video if you want to read it, concluded that although it's not possible to assess all of the applications of a keto diet in headache disorders, evidence does suggest that it may be beneficial. And a very prestigious journal called Nature Reviews Neurology says that keto and other non-medication treatments can be used either as adjunct to acute and preventative medications, or instead of them if medication use is contraindicated. And then for elimination diets, it looks to eliminate the foods that trigger a migraine. Now, this can be a little bit tricky because some foods trigger a migraine hours or maybe even days after you eat it. But if you find that a specific food triggers your migraines, then try cutting it down a little bit. I'm going to give you a quick list of the foods that commonly trigger migraines and try to see if you can cut down and if it helps or not. Alcohol, especially if it's red wine, beans, caffeine, cheese, yogurt, Chinese food, especially if it contains MSG, and processed meats. And of these, let's talk about caffeine. So caffeine can actually help migraines, but if you drink too much caffeine, then it can actually make them worse. So how much is too much? That essentially depends. You see, if you have 15 or more migraines per month, it isn't advisable for you to take any caffeine. But if you have less than 15 migraines per month, the max recommended amount is 200 milligrams, which equates to around 2 8-ounce cups of brewed coffee. Anyway, that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions or concerns, let me know in the comments. If you liked the video, make sure you tap the like button, ask me anything you want, and I'll see you in the next video.